It's the one we've all been talking about, the all-new Sonos Era 300. Sonos' first ever Dolby Atmos speaker is here, and wow, do we have a lot to talk about. Since the announcement of the new Sonos products, I've been dying to get my hands on an Era 300 to test it out. Now, I wasn't too sure what to expect from this product, but small teaser, I think this will pave the way for a new generation of speakers. After living with it for a few weeks, I can hopefully answer a lot of your questions and help you decide whether to add this speaker to your home. So, Sonos have introduced this new era of speakers for them as a brand, and while the Era 100 is a new breed of speaker with more versatile connectivity and stereo performance, Era 300 is really where they've set the bar for new speakers. As there seem to be a few unknowns around this speaker, I'm going to kick off with a quick fire fact check round to get us all up to speed. So, first off, this is a brand new speaker for Sonos and not a replacement of any previous generations. It will sit below the Sonos 5 in the lineup, which will remain as their most premium speaker for now, and don't worry, we will be comparing these two speakers in this review. Yes, two Era 300s can be used as rears to a Sonos soundbar, but only to a Dolby Atmos enabled soundbar, so just the Arc or Beam Gen 2. And no, sadly, you cannot use a pair of Era 300s for your TV audio on their own. Right, so we've cleared a couple of things up, but what about the actual design of this speaker? So I don't know about you guys, but when I first saw the initial renders of the Era 300 online, I was a little bit skeptical about the design. It's definitely unique. And after having chatted to a couple of you guys on Instagram and on our YouTube comments as well, I think we all kind of shared a similar opinion that it was going to be a little bit divisive. After having the speaker out of the box for the last day or so, to be honest with you, I've not even thought about the design. And actually, I think I quite like it. The top panel controls are nice and the new intuitive volume slider works really well. It's quick to get to a certain volume. One swipe from left to right increases it by 30%. There's also the two controls for the microphones too, which is good. And there's this new Bluetooth button here on the back. I actually think it's quite useful to give you guys some context with the size. So let me grab a 5 and a 1. So as you can see, it's a lot bigger than the 1, but not quite as big as the 5. And from the front, it's actually quite a subtle design. So I think this will really help it to blend into your space. Inside, we've got a pretty unique speaker makeup. There are a total of 6 Class D amps powering 4 tweeters and 2 woofers. We've got one mid-tweeter at the front here that provides the center image and covers the vocals and lead instruments. And then on the sides, we've got 2 sideways firing mid-tweeters and 2 woofers for the bass, and these all work to improve the stereo separation. Finally, there's an upwards firing tweeter on the top, which is angled around 10 degrees forward, and that bounces the sound off your ceiling to deliver those height channels in Atmos content. Now, this makeup means that this speaker can deliver Atmos effects from a standalone unit, which I think is a first. I do think Trueplay is important for the Era 300 to get a feel for the space that you've placed it in and adjust the levels to match. Now, one thing to note is there are now 2 options for Trueplay. If you're an iOS user, you still have the usual method of using the mic in your device and walking around a space, and Sonos refer to this as advanced tuning and is still the best method. But not to be left out anymore, Android users can now use quick tuning, which uses the mics in the speaker itself to analyze the space and make any tweaks needed. So in terms of placement, Sonos are recommending that wherever you put this speaker, you do have at least 2 feet or so of clearance from above and 8 inches either side. So you're not going to be putting this in a bookshelf, for example. Now, if you are going to wall mount these speakers and have them up high, it is worth turning them the other way around so your speakers aren't being blocked by the roof. So these are all really, really important things to consider to make sure that the space that you have is going to be suitable for these speakers. This speaker is also designed with sustainability in mind. They've used less virgin plastics, more screws instead of glue, and the packaging is 100% recyclable. Now, Sonos have claimed to reduce the energy efficiency of these speakers both when playing and when idle. So of course, we wanted to test that out. So using these smart plugs, we checked the Era 100 versus the Sonos 1 Gen 2 first and found that while they were pretty similar when playing, when idle, the 100 is twice as efficient as the 1. Now the Era 300 by comparison pulls 1.75 watts when idle, and the Sonos 5 pulls 2.74 watts. So for comparison, at 34 pence per kilowatt hour, the Era 300 will cost on average 1 pence per day when idle compared to 2 pence for the 5. Now, when it comes to connections, the Era 300 is ticking a lot of boxes and giving us the versatility that we've been asking for. So we've got Wi-Fi 6, which is what I'd consider the Sonos route for connectivity, and it gives us the most reliable connection. Now, we've also got the usual options such as AirPlay 2, Spotify Connect, and voice control with Sonos Voice or Amazon Alexa. Now, unfortunately, no Google Assistant on this speaker, which will of course be disappointing for some of you. Now, it does seem like Sonos and Google are having one of those ongoing relationship problems, but I've got my fingers crossed that with a little bit of couples therapy, we could be seeing that added over a software update in the future. What is new on this speaker and an interesting move for Sonos is the addition of Bluetooth. Now, Sonos have previously taken the stance that Wi-Fi is the better solution, but it looks like so many people have requested Bluetooth that they've finally given in. Now, it's only Bluetooth 5.0, so not the latest version even now, but I presume that's because it's not a portable speaker, and as it will be connected in the home, it's not needed. So while I don't see myself using Bluetooth at home, I can see it being a handy addition for when people come over. One thing missing from this speaker and the Era 100 is Sonos Net. Now, with the addition of Wi-Fi 6 and better connectivity, I don't see this being a big problem, and I'm guessing this is why Sonos haven't included Sonos Net with this speaker. With the rise of Matter as well, I imagine that's another factor, and while there's been no confirmation yet, Sonos are registered with Matter, and I wouldn't be surprised if this speaker will be able to be a Matter thread radio at some point, which will be like Sonos Net on steroids, but we'll have to wait and see on that for now. Now, another addition connectivity-wise is to do with this line-in connection here. This is a USB-C line-in connection that allows you to connect the Era 300 up to an external audio source, like a turntable that I've got here, for example. Now, annoyingly, you do need to purchase the Sonos dongle in order to get this particular setup working properly. I have already tried, before you guys ask, using an adapter from Amazon, but because the majority of them online are line out, they won't actually work with this particular setup, so you do need to purchase the Sonos branded dongle. However, if anyone has found a workaround out there, then please let us know, and we'd definitely love to try that out. So whilst we're on the topic of connecting up to other external audio devices, a lot of you guys have asked us about using the 300s as PC speakers. And to be honest, we do see the 100s being a more popular choice, but over Bluetooth, the 300s perform really well. We tried with YouTube videos, Zoom calls, and there was no real lag or delay, and we were pretty impressed with them. However, it is really worth pointing out that you cannot use the mics on the speaker, you have to use mics on the computer itself. So just something to bear in mind. Okay, on to the good bit, the sound. Now, I covered the internals earlier, but how can we actually experience all of that? Well, previously, to access Atmos content on a Sonos product, you'd have to do a little bit of a workaround with a Beam or an Arc connected up to an Apple TV. Now, you'd be glad to hear it's a lot more straightforward with this speaker. Sonos recently announced support for Apple Music Spatial Audio will be live from the 28th of March, which is the launch date of the Era products, which of course can't be a coincidence, and this is huge. But as we were testing this speaker out before that, I've been using Dolby Atmos content on Amazon Music, which I've also been loving. Now, if you're a regular on this channel, you'll know that I'm traditionally a Spotify user, and currently I'm out of luck when it comes to Dolby Atmos music through Spotify. I personally think that once someone at Spotify hears Atmos content on this Era 300, they won't be able to fight it anymore, and they'll give the people what they want. So fingers crossed, we'll see support from Spotify soon. I think many in the industry are seeing this as the future. There's a reason something like 90 out of the top 100 Billboard albums are mixed in Atmos. Now, Giles Martin, the head of sound experience at Sonos and Grammy award-winning producer, has also said that adapted versions of these Era 300s are being used as reference monitors in studios for mixing Atmos tracks, which just shows how relevant and how capable this product is. And while normal music is also impressive on this speaker, I found myself hoping that all of my favorite tracks show up with that Atmos logo, as the experience is just, well, it's nothing like I've heard before. Now, you can't get Atmos audio via Bluetooth or AirPlay. You need a direct connection to the music server. And beyond Apple themselves, no one else has a dedicated link to that Apple Music server apart from Sonos. So we see this being a huge plus for them right now, and of course for the Era 300. To be honest with you guys, I've loved testing this speaker, and I wish I could play some Atmos tracks for you to show you the effects, but I'll have to settle for playing some regular tracks, which still sound great and they're a better experience than normal, and then I'll explain what we found from our listening. But with this product in particular, we're never going to be able to share the experience you get over YouTube. For me, this speaker does a brilliant job of placing elements of a track around the room. You almost can't believe the audio is coming from one speaker. It gives a wide soundstage that definitely feels 3D. Vocals are really impressive and the overall performance feels super realistic. And I got that cliche feeling of the artist being in the room with me. The bass is also more than I was expecting from this speaker. Now, it's not quite at the same level as the Sonos 5 as it just hasn't got the size, but it does pack a punch. And yes, Atmos content sounds better, but I also enjoyed the experience for regular music as you get all of the benefits of a spacious, detailed sound, great bass and vocals. Personally, my favorite experience from these speakers was as a stereo pair. The overall performance is honestly incredible. The separation provided gave a different feeling to tracks that I've heard 100 times over, and the stereo imaging gives a great experience. So you really feel like the music comes from all around you and not just from two separate speakers. The bass is very accurate and deep, and I don't think that most people will feel the need to add a sub to this setup. I've tested spatial audio on the Arc before, which is roughly the same price, and genuinely, it's no comparison. The Eras win hands down for music. I personally think that this setup is going to ruffle a lot of feathers in the audio market. For Dolby Atmos content, I've just never heard anything so gripping for under £1,000. As I mentioned, these can't be used for your TV audio alone, and I think that that's a real shame. I would have loved to have connected these to my TV via HDMI, as I think a stereo pair would have been a brilliant setup for your TV audio. I think once people have heard these speakers, there will be a lot of pressure on Sonos to add this functionality. And hey, it worked with Bluetooth, so let's see. Now, I'm picturing 3 of these at the front and 2 as rears. I mean, what a setup that would be. And what's also interesting is the new Apple TV upgrade, where you can connect a pair of HomePods via HDMI eARC and use them for all of your TV audio. I would love it if Sonos gave us something like that. What we can do with these speakers, however, is use them as rears in a Sonos home cinema setup. Now, my initial thoughts, having tested them out as a stereo pair, is that they're almost too good for rears. They're also an expensive addition, and is it actually worth it? So for some of you, probably not, but there are a lot of people who use 5s as rears right now, so there is clearly a market for this. Now, we will be doing another video on a full 7.2.4 setup with an Arc and 2 sub-Gen 3s, and a video covering all of the different Sonos rears options, including how different these are to the 100s for home theatre, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But for now, I'll share my thoughts from testing 2 Era 300s as rears to a Sonos Beam and the Arc and sub-Gen 3. Coming in at £2,500 minus any stands or mounts, this is an expensive setup. But for true movie lovers, you are going to love this. We're getting a 7.1.4 from this setup, and the upwards firing capabilities of the Arc and Era 300 work together to create a full 3D effect, putting you right at the very center of the action. It's a very expansive setup, and it really does sound like audio is coming from all around and above you. If I close my eyes, I would honestly struggle to point out where the speakers were. Now, what's also interesting is that as there are so many speakers around the Era 300, it doesn't feel like sound is coming at the back or side of your head. In fact, you can actually press your ear against the front of the speaker and it doesn't really sound like it's playing, as it's not all coming from the front. The overall immersion of this setup is truly impressive. It reminds me of when you're watching a film in the cinema and you're glued to the screen for 2 hours. You really do struggle to look away from the action. You're completely locked in. The addition of the Era 300s makes everything sound better. It makes scenes feel more dramatic and adds extra tension with background effects and the immersion of the soundtrack. Now, sure, this setup does a great job in films like Maverick, where you've got missiles flying everywhere, but I've actually really appreciated the effects in more subtle, more ambient scenes. Like, for example, when they're in the Thopter in June, it feels like you're in the middle of the desert with sun flying past you. I found Quiet Place another great film for testing this setup too, because it's the scene where she's in the house hiding from a death angel. It's brilliant. The clock ticking in the background sounds like it comes from the far corner of the room, and you really follow the action around the screen with all of the different noises and breaths moving around you. When we tested the rears out with the Beam, you obviously lose out on the performance of the Arc, but I think getting the addition of the Atmos rears really adds another dimension for the Beam. Look, like I said, these aren't cheap rears, and I do feel like for a lot of people, this will be overkill. But in the right space, if you've got the budget and you love movies, this is one hell of a setup. For me personally, they would be a luxury as Riz, and I'll get far more for my money with a stereo pair. I mean, in an ideal world, I'd be getting 2 pairs, one for music and one for movies, but that's not realistic for me, so I'm going music first. If you're tempted by these, then I'd suggest getting a pair and trying them in both scenarios and see which setup you get the most use out of. Now, compared with the 5, the Era 300 offers a completely different experience. And I might actually do a dedicated comparison for you guys if you want that. But my overall feedback is that the 5 is a louder, bigger, and bassier speaker. Era is a completely different beast. And of course, it does depend on what you're looking for. So if you want to sit down and listen to every detail in your music and will make use of Dolby Atmos tracks, you're going to want the Era. But the 5 is still a great speaker and will likely fill a larger space better. Now, I've seen some of you asking whether we think there's an Era 500 on the way, and yes, I can definitely see that coming. I think there will be a whole range of Era products on the way, but I don't see that being anytime soon. And of course, they've got those headphones to bring out first, surely. So we've obviously tested this speaker out in a lot of different scenarios, but that's what this product does, right? It's a versatile speaker which can be used in a number of different ways, and there's no right choice. It all comes down to how you like to enjoy your entertainment. I think the Era 300 is doing some really clever stuff, and honestly, I think the best way we could test this speaker was by forgetting about the tech for a minute and just enjoying the music or movies that we were testing. As a standalone speaker, this is a fantastic experience for music, and what they've achieved with Atmos effects from one unit is truly impressive. I think it will only get better once we hopefully see more services add in Atmos content over time, but there's plenty of ways to get listening with these speakers already. This product might not be for everyone and every setup, and it's definitely not an impulse edition. Sonos have named these speakers Era as they believe this truly is a new era of audio, and after spending a few weeks with this product, I do think that Sonos have created something truly unique, and I cannot wait for you guys to hear it. If you think this might be for you, then I'll pop a QR code up on the screen now and all of the links down in the description. For now, I'll catch you guys in the comments. Thank you for watching.